evenings. Yes, my name is Jay Arena with the Sociology and Anthropology Department. First of all, I'd like to give kudos to the Students for Justice in Palestine here at the College of Staten Island for organizing this lecture, for all the events they've organized over the last 2 years here, which has really contributed to the intellectual environment of this campus. And it's the first, I've been here 6 years now, it's the first, there's a lot of great students here, but this is the first group that I've seen of students that have actually taken the initiative to organize a whole series of events, and I think it should be a challenge for that. And they've also, it should be emphasized, and people like Catherine Laughter who helped create our general education goals, they've helped achieve some of those key goals that we've set forward here at this university around achieving ethical judgment and personal development and social responsibility and civic engagement, particularly on local and global issues. So you get an A for hitting those goals, and I think the administration should be aware of that. Now to our speaker. We live in strange times, disturbing times, in the world and including in this country, where people that speak out against injustice and oppression, that take action against injustice and oppression, are the ones demonized. We're now on the eve of the decision by the grand jury on whether the killer of Michael Brown will be charged with murder, any kind of charge. And yet we see those that have spoken out and demanded justice are the ones being demonized and threatened with imprisonment, threatened with arrest. We have medical professionals coming back from West Africa who have sacrificed to serve, to confront the Ebola crisis. And yet when they return, they're thrown in quarantine, they're demonized, stigmatized, instead of being recognized for their sacrifice. And also we have what occurred this past summer with the Israeli assault on Palestine. Horrified the world, 50 days of bombardment, over 2,000 people killed, 11,000 injured, tens of thousands of homes destroyed. And yet what we see is some of the people that spoke out against this injustice, against this crime, that took action against that crime, are the ones being demonized. And one prime example of that is our guest speaker, Steven Salaita. So let's give him a big round of applause. But despite the attempts to silence him, he has refused to be silenced, and he's going around the country to speak about his case and the attack on not only the Palestinians, but on democratic rights here in this country, here on our campuses across the country. So let's hand it over to him.
Well, thank you for having me and for turning up on such a chilly afternoon, and I too want to add my voice of thanks to SJP. Around the country, it's an organization. The students are doing a terrific job of organizing, not only to raise awareness about the ongoing colonization of Palestine, but they're doing a fantastic job, I think, of sort of entering into activism with other groups who are facing some form of marginalization or oppression, and I hope to see those efforts continue. Well, I feel like the atmosphere today lends itself to something more conversation-based or discussion-based. So I want to talk just for a few moments. I don't want to bore everybody to death, and then I'm very eager to take whatever questions that anybody might have, and you can ask me about anything, Palestine or academic freedom or my situation with the university or whatever else is on your mind. I'll do my best to answer as well as I can. Just a few things because to put my situation in context, and some of you in the room already probably know how the process of academic hiring works and why academic freedom is such an important concept in practice. But so I'll go over it only briefly. I applied for the job at the University of Illinois in October 2012. Right? I'm not getting my dates confused. It took me a while to work it out to make sure that my absent-mindedness didn't torpedo me. All right. I was offered the job in October of 2013. At which point I signed a contract, and the university countersigned that contract and sent me a letter welcoming to the faculty and welcoming to the institution and so forth and so on. I wasn't set to begin the position until August 16th of 2014. All right, so that's almost a 2-year-long process from the moment of the application to the beginning of the contract. Academic hires very often take that long. All right, sometimes they take less than a year, sometimes they can take a few months, but they never happen over the course of a week or two, or even over a month. It's a very, very long process. I was coming into my position at the University of Illinois with tenure. So that means besides the normal intense vetting and scrutiny that an academic job applicant receives, I had to go through additional scrutiny and vetting. That is anywhere from 4 to 6 external referees, that is people outside of the University of Illinois, looked at my teaching dossier, they read my research, et cetera, and had to write a report about whether they felt that I was worthy of tenure or not. And all 4 to 6 of them, I don't even know how many because the process for the candidate is confidential, right? They all recommended me for the appointment, right? Then over the course of, and I wish I were making this up, but all of the evidence points to the fact that for once the administrators of U of I are not lying. In a Board of Trustees meeting, the student, or one of the student representatives, read a few of my tweets. The brain trust there decided on the spot that I was anti-Semitic and a rabid racist and therefore unfit to teach. And so they decided to rescind the appointment. So we're talking about, on the one hand, a process that took around 2 years, or that took nearly 2 years, right? Versus a process that, in the Board of Trustees' own words, took 10 minutes. This is why academic freedom is important. And academic freedom means, among many other things, right, the ability of the faculty, who are experts in their fields, or supposed to be experts in their field, right? Usually it's the case, right? They get to decide, right, who they want to hire into their departments based on their departmental needs, right? And that the boards of trustees run the business end of the university, right? And professors run the academic side of the university. One reason why we don't want boards of trustees to involve themselves in the academic side of things on campus, right, is because most of them aren't actually academics, right? Most of them are lawyers or business people or, esteemed members of the community in some way, but they don't have generally academic backgrounds, all right? They're generally members of the, quite frankly, members of the local elite, all right? That's who tends to get appointed or voted into these sorts of positions, right? So what you have then are a body of business people whose main function is to run, the fiscal operations of the university, sticking their nose into a long and rigorous process of faculty hiring. All right, based not on any disciplinary expertise, based not on an ability to accurately assess somebody else's pedagogy, right? But based on the whims and desires of wealthy donors. Right? We don't want wealthy donors deciding who can be hired and who can be fired at any university, because then universities are not going to look so much like educational institutions, right? But like the American political system as a whole, right? Wherein those with the deepest pockets get the most representation, and ideas therefore are sold, right, to the highest bidder. We're seeing this happen more and more, by the way. There's an incident at Florida State recently where the Koch brothers, they donated money to the econ department for a hire, and they attached strings to that donation. They said, we want you to hire somebody who teaches sort of free market, libertarian economics, right? And if you don't do that, right, you're not getting this donation. So the chair of the department accepted the donation and hired exactly who the Koch brothers wanted him to hire. Okay, look, I don't know. You can feel about the Koch brothers any way you want. I don't really care about them, but the point is, whether you agree with their politics or disagree with their politics, all right, they're not actually economists. They're not academics. They're not professors. What they're doing, right, is interjecting through the influence of their sponsorship. They're interjecting a particular political point of view into an educational marketplace, right, based on their own desires and interests, and not on the desires and interests of the students at Florida State or of the members of the economics faculty at Florida State. All right, and as universities become more and more reliant on gifts from wealthy donors, right? We have to guard ourselves. We have to guard ourselves even more vigorously against these sorts of interventions, where the big money donors get to say, right, who departments hire and who departments fire. So my tweets supposedly got me fired, but I don't believe it, right? And I'm happy to discuss my tweets and your interpretations of them, because I know that they've been circulated all over the place over the past few months. But two things. One, I've been tweeting for 3 or 4 years, all right, and I can't imagine that it just became a problem 2 weeks before I was going to begin. It's the first thing, and the second thing is, I don't buy the notion that they found the tweets disturbing or uncivil. I don't. Because every university administrator or supporter of the university's decision has pointed to has been critical of Israel. All right, so he cusses. All right, I cuss in all my tweets. Right, it's only a problem, right, when Israel is involved. You see, right? I use strong language. All right, he uses strong language. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Well, I use strong language in lots of tweets. I've said F ISIL, right? I've gone to town on Republicans. I've gone to town on the Kingdom of Jordan, of which I'm a citizen, right? I've gone to town on lots of things, all right? But in all the examples I've been monitored, right? I've had to listen to this idiocy for a long time, right? Because I want to make sure. I want to see exactly what's going on. And every time somebody has pointed out a problematic tweet, so to speak, every single time it has to do with Israel. Nobody called it uncivil when I was using 4 little words to describe Arab politics. or American politics. So I wasn't fired because of tweets. Tweets are a pretext. I was fired because I condemned Israel. And that's the one thing in universities that's a surefire way to bring scrutiny to a person and to bring negative attention to a person. Correspondingly, I think my termination had to do even more specifically, not simply with criticism of Israel, but with donor pressure, all right, and the desires of at the very least, a handful of wealthy donors who said, you need to take care of this before this guy begins, otherwise we're going to withhold future contributions. So this is sort of the context of academic freedom at play here, but as I hope I've indicated already, it's not just a matter of academic freedom in a vacuum. It's a matter in particular of academic freedom vis-a-vis the politics of the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? And a lot of people before me, right, have been, have been fired or not tenured or whatever because of their views, their local views on the conflict. And one of the goals now is to make sure that it's not something that will continue happening in the future, right? We want this to be the last time that the pro-Israel donors interfere with the function of a university and get to make a decision about who that university hires or doesn't hire. But if you want to go into the broader context that I think is really important, academic freedom has always been a dicey proposition for minority communities, particularly ethnic minority communities. African Americans especially have suffered the demands of civility on college campuses for many, many decades now. All right, women have suffered those demands of civility. Indigenous peoples have suffered those demands of civility. In other words, being held to a different standard or being held to a higher standard, right? Or not being heard in the first place, or being punished for articulating viewpoints that those who identify with the elite or with the political power structure find disquieting, all right? And there's always been recrimination in the academy for this particular form of critique, all right? There are a lot of things that you can criticize and not receive much attention on campus and in American society more broadly, but the moment that somebody takes up a systematic analysis of the functions of state power, right, then that person has entered into a space where he or she is going to attract unwelcome scrutiny. Israel certainly fits into this paradigm, but also discussing profound economic injustice in the United States will certainly bring unwanted attention. Discussing structural racism in the United States will certainly bring unwanted attention. And by structural racism, I mean those forms of racism that are built into the very structure of our national identity, right? Rather than outsourcing racism, right, to the idiots on the margins, right? Who every now and again, blurt out the N-word, right? And it's easy to focus our attention on these margins to say, oh, I don't use this kind of language, right? I would never say what Paula Dean said, right? Therefore, I'm not racist, and therefore I'm not implicated in racism, therefore I don't have to deal with racism, right? A much more productive and I think a much more honest approach will say, well, let's look at how racism functions in the structure of this very society, and let's look at the ways that I might benefit from it. Let's look at the ways that other people, right, suffer because of it, and let's look at the ways that inequality continues to perpetuate itself based on the existence of this particular structural racism. And then, okay, academically, intellectually, right, even morally, right, you're on the right path there, right, but that's when you run up against a particular power structure, right? Because you're critiquing something that's systematic, right? Rather than something that exists in the margin and can be pointed to as somebody else's problem, all right? And there's always been there's always been sort of a harsh reaction to this sort of critique, and so our college campuses, where these issues are supposed to be openly discussed and debated, are suddenly closing themselves off, right, to these types of difficult but necessary critiques. So a few more things, and I'd love to open it up to questions or comments. I think corresponding to to what I just said about issues of structural racism and structural inequality. There's been a lot of discussion about how students would fare in my classes, or might fare in my classes, and I find that to be a deeply anti-academic and anti-intellectual argument. When I still taught college, right? One of the first things that we said about understanding in any of my classes is that we're not going to, or I'm not going to be assigning grades based on political points of view. I think that's a stupid way to assign grades anyway. First of all, because my political points of view are changed often, right? So I don't think that it's fair to affix a grade for somebody's viewpoint in a particular moment in time, right? It's not a static thing, right? Or it shouldn't be a static thing, all right? If your politics are static, all right, then you're gonna end up like you're gonna end up watching like Bill O'Reilly on TV and thinking that he's not insane. Okay, so just be warned that your viewpoint shouldn't be static, right? That your politics should evolve and they should be dynamic. But also because I think one of the major jobs of a college educator is to try to compel or convince students of the importance and the necessity, actually, of raising arguments, right, that have an evidentiary basis. In other words, you need to provide evidence for your claims, all right? Small claims and large claims. So in a literature class, it might look like this, okay? The observation might be, oh, well, I think Sherman Alexie is really funny. There's, nothing wrong with that, but you need to illustrate to me, right, what about Sherman Alexie's work you consider funny, and how you're defining funny in this particular context. Now you're providing evidence for a claim, and now the argument is beginning to take shape. Political claims, the same thing, right? So if you're talking about a particular political issue, if you want to say, for instance, that Israel oppresses the Palestinians. Okay, fine. Okay, there's your claim, but I need I need evidence of this claim, right? I need you to show me, right, sources, credible sources that show, right, that Israel oppresses Palestinians. I need you to present some sort of evidence that what you define as oppression is actually oppressive, and so forth and so on. So this is what we do in my college classes, and in the vast majority of college classes that exist. We teach that you need to learn how to provide evidence for claims, that you just don't go around making assertions, right, that don't have anything to validate them, right? And that you be able to do it in a coherent way. In other words, your paper has to make sense, right? Your argument has to make sense. People have to know what the hell you're talking about, right? Which I'm probably failing at that task right now, but just do as I say, not as I do, right? Okay, so there, that the university administrators, right, and my fellow academics, right, who are questioning aloud my ability to conduct a classroom, are therefore undermining, right, the basic tenet of any college education, right, that claims require evidence. All right, it's deeply anti-intellectual and it's deeply dishonest because there is zero evidence, not a scintilla of evidence that the sorts of things that they claim that I would do in the classroom, right, I've ever done in the classroom, right? There's no evidence, but there's stacks and stacks and stacks of evidence that that I've been an outstanding teacher throughout my career, and in fact, I've never fielded a student complaint about my pedagogy in the 17 years that I've taught college. It hasn't happened, right? Nobody's ever said he's been hostile to my viewpoint, or he made me feel like I was stupid, or he made me feel like I was a terrible person. It just hasn't happened. So what they're doing then is not only making claims based on silly speculation, but they are basing extraordinary decisions, right, on speculation that doesn't exist with any evidence attached to it. To me, that means that they're way less unfit to be on a college campus than I am. All right, that's the first. The second thing is that nobody ever asked. Everybody was asked about the comfort of Jewish students in my class. Well, they have no reason to. Never had a Jewish student or a student of any other background, sort of raise concerns about my teaching, and people have asked me, well, what about your Jewish students? Like, I don't know who the hell my students are Jewish and who aren't. I don't know which my students are Muslim or which aren't. I don't know what my students are unless they volunteer it to me. All right, I just don't know, right? What am I going to guess based on somebody's name, right? That's stupid. Very often you're wrong, right? So I'm not making lists of the perceived ethnic groupings of my students and judging them accordingly. I never presume to know what ethnic background my students are unless they tell me, and if they want to tell me, then it's entirely voluntary. I would never ask them, hey, what are you, right? It just doesn't seem to me a useful thing to do. But have you ever noticed that nobody ever asks about the comfort of Palestinian students, or the comfort of Arab students, or the comfort of Muslim students, or the comfort of women students, or the comfort of black students, or the comfort of Latino students, right? It's always some variation of white student, right, whose comfort we need to tend to, and whose comfort we need to be anxious about, right? You never hear anything about it. And the reason you never hear anything about it is because they are considered, unconsciously or not, right, the normative standard, right, for discourse, acceptable discourse on a college campus. They're the ones whose comfort matters because they are made to represent. I'm not saying that they individually represent. I'm saying that they are made to represent a particular normative politics, right, around race and power in the United States, right? And so their comfort matters because they end up becoming a stand-in for the comfort of the majority in the United States in total, right? Nobody cares about the comfort of Palestinian students. When I was, when I was an undergrad, undergraduate student, I heard some dumb shit just about every week in class about Arabs. All right, I don't know if Arab students still sort of face this kind of thing, or Muslim students, right? But I remember I'd call my dad. I never called home, right? I'd just call about this. I'd be like, Dad, you will never believe what I just heard in class. Apparently, you are genetically predisposed to beating mom. Do you know what I mean? And you hear this stuff all the time. All right. You think the one black kid in class likes being pointed on and saying, hey, so tell me all about your people, right? Or let's talk about Africa. Do you know what I mean? Or this happens over and over and over again in the college classroom. But nobody ever stops and says, well, what about the comfort, right, of the students that have to deal with this sort of nonsense, all right? And so I'm asking you essentially, and I don't know if I'm convincing you or not, but I'm asking you to not to buy into the notion that student comfort, right, is some neutral thing, right? That the idea of student comfort is without politics, right? Or that it arises from some universal pedagogical concern, all right? It too is very deeply inscribed, right, in the broader practices of injustice and marginalization that exist inside the United States. So, let me just close on this, so we can have time for for discussion. I'm making the case to you. I hope effectively that that our notions of right and wrong, our notions of justice and injustice, our notions of what's normal and abnormal, our notions of what's civil and uncivil, right, or never arise in a vacuum. That they're not in and of themselves neutral. That they come out of a long process of socialization and a long process, right, of attachment, right, to various interests and centers of power and whatnot. And so, when we hear administrators applying labels of civil and uncivil to various phenomena, various individuals, various discourses, various ways of speaking, then I think that it's profoundly important to pause and think about what civil and civility mean and where those terms came from in the first place. Right? Those terms come out of a centuries-long process of European colonization of the Arab world, of Sub-Saharan Africa, North and South America, of South Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, almost the entire world, certainly the entire southern hemisphere of the world. All right. So civil and civility are terms deeply implicated in colonization. They're deeply implicated in the genocide of indigenous peoples. They're terms that are deeply implicated in the notion that certain people are inherently superior, right, to other people. All right, and so when the University of Illinois administrators invoke civility, but college administrators around the country are doing it now, right? Don't think of it as a means to form an objective judgment about somebody or about a particular idea. Think of it as a rhetorical strategy, right? That's meant to silence a particular viewpoint that somebody among the elite finds threatening. All right, that it's not a neutral value, and it's not a neutral judgment. It's in fact a term, right, that's implicated in more than 500 years of colonial violence. All right, and I was hired in the American Indian Studies program, by the way, and so you put two and two together, and you think about the use of the term civility, right, and then you think about the age-old imagery, right, of native peoples, right, as of the uncivilized and as the savage, and you begin to realize that the decision that the University of Illinois made is not terrible in and of itself, right, from a legal and academic freedom point of view, but it shows that we haven't, in this country, overcome the sort of colonial logic, right, that we claim that we've already moved beyond. That in fact that colonial logic very often dictates or continues to dictate what we find rational, right, and what we find acceptable, and what we find as an appropriate mode of conveyance to students and others in the classroom. I'll go ahead and pause now and take questions or comments. Yeah.
My name is Tom Weiss, and I'm a journalist at Philadelphia Newsweek. I identify very strongly with your comments about academic freedom. It's really a political environment, and I've experienced that as far as local express. But my question is more, and giving you a view of that Israeli-Palestinian situation. One of my friends, I'm Jewish, Catholic, Christian, one of my good friends is Palestinian, they used to live in Staten Island. And was an advocate of what is generally referred to or often misunderstood as a one-state solution, where the Jewish state and Palestinian state cease to exist in the country. So, in my sense, and he actually wrote a paper on which I edited, my question is that my sense is that among the stumbling blocks to the resolution on the one side is, for example, the Netanyahu obsession with these settlements, which is always a stumbling block, and on the other side, not so much the PLO, but the Hamas insistence that, if I understand correctly, that there can be no Jewish state. And those two situations are so diametrically opposed that there's no way. My question is, where do you come with regard to that question?
Okay. Thank you for coming and for raising the point and for your question. You need to give me the 30 seconds after I'm gone for like 45 minutes. It's your job to keep me in check too. I can ramble. Don't make me prove it. Really.
Just won't get tension.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. That's always a problem. The more I say, the greater the chance that I get myself in trouble. Yeah. Well, I guess a lot of thoughts about it. Let me start by saying, because this is the necessary qualification every Palestinian needs to make in order to be conceptualized as human in the first place. But I'm no fan of Hamas. But then again, I'm no fan of the PA. No fan of the Israeli government. I'm no fan of the American government. I'm no fan really of any nation state at the level of government. All right, so I'm not attached to any particular political institution or movement or ideology. I'm a free agent. I can be easily swayed to different different points of view, but. There is I think a general misconception or misunderstanding of Hamas's flexibility here. Hamas has been, in my opinion, a below average governing body, right, in the Gaza Strip for the past 7 or 8 years. Hamas has not been helped, right, in its governing practices by a constant, continuous siege, economic siege, numerous military sieges, right, a population that is isolated and entrapped and that has no means of escape, right, economic sanctions, right, an inability for the population to travel, right, inside Israel to work, and that's where most of them worked before the embargo began, right? An inability to travel into Egypt, right? So they're just sort of trapped, all right? The control or the flow of food and other vital resources, medical, educational, etc., is strictly controlled by Israel. So while I say that Hamas has done a below average job of governance, I don't think it's fair to make any sort of judgment about them as a government without also pointing out the the impossible challenges that have been imposed on it, right, and the people of Gaza more broadly. Having said that, Hamas had ever since 1994 has shown a sort of flexibility, right, to concede, right, certain points or certain issues to Israel that actually in many cases outpaces the attitude of the Palestinian population more broadly. I myself heard Sheikh Yassin, the original leader of Hamas, say that he's happy to recognize Israel in its 1967 borders as long as the Palestinian refugees have a right to return. All right, this was in 2000 when I heard this with my own ears. All right, Hamas, just Google it, his release statement after statement over the past 10, 15 years saying that under conditions X, Y, Z, all reasonable conditions, by the way, right, that they are willing to live with Israel, right? Hamas has tried to back channel negotiations with Israel over and over and over again, and this is also documented in many places online. Does Hamas have a tendency towards rejectionism and obscurantism? Yeah, sure, of course it does, right? But there's also a long record of Hamas at least being willing to negotiate in some good faith, all right, and be willing to make concessions that again. That actually most of the Palestinian population would probably find untenable. Having said that, there is not corresponding evidence, all right, that the Israeli government is willing to make necessary concessions X, Y, Z, or even necessary concession X, all right, to bring about something of a lasting peace, or at least the facade of a lasting peace. So when we talk about sort of one side rejecting the other, just as a matter of political principle, I don't know that it's the job of the colonized to accept the permanence of the colonizer, right? The burden is on the colonizer, right, to accept the reality of the colonized, right? And Israel has never, to my knowledge, affirmed, all right, the existence of a Palestinian people, right, with legitimate grievances, right, and with a corresponding right to repatriation, right, and just resolution. In other words, there's never been a viable state, Palestinian state that Israel's willing to get on board with, and I just can't take seriously. I can't take seriously a peace process, right? It's all been ongoing ever since 1991, all right? It's always ongoing simultaneous to settlement construction, all right? So and so I don't rely, and I don't think we should rely on Hamas or the PA or Netanyahu or Shimon Peres or anybody else to bring about a peace. I think in the end that's the duty of the people who actually live in this territory and the people outside of the territory who are concerned with it, right? If we rely on governments to get things done or to produce just resolutions, then we're generally going to be waiting for a very, very long time. So to me, whatever solutions that do exist outside of the very tired framework, right, of the U.S.-led peace process, which really should have been put into its grave a very, very long time ago, because it hasn't been close to working, and there's no indication that it's going to be close to working anytime soon.
Maria Wickstrom, I'm professor of theater here at the College of Staten Island at the Graduate Center. My question has to do with perhaps younger colleagues or colleagues without tenure, and what your case has kind of so graphically brought to light. During the summer's invasion of Gaza, I know that younger colleagues without tenure were afraid to post on Facebook, were afraid to speak out, and I just wondered what your thoughts are on how those with less clout in the academy might proceed.
Of course not. Of course not.
My question, I have two questions, you can sort of want. So, what advice do you have for students who wish to express their political views in classes and how worried they should be? I mean, I remember writing a paper about Hamas and then the NYPD report coming out and me believing that I would go to jail. And then part two is, when it comes, what advice do you have for students who want to become professors or or not go when it comes to it.
Sure.
My name is Eric Hall. I'm an organizer, just a community member here. Just curious what you think, how you talk so much about structural racism, how students and professors, or how do we begin to tackle structural racism on college campus?
Okay, sure. Well, thank you. Let me. I think that I actually think that all three questions kind of integrate. So if I'm not addressing anything that you wanted me to address, please do let me know. As a general rule, and there are always differences. I'm not a fan of people being silent and unless that's what they're comfortable to do. By that I mean, some people. When I was a student, I never talked in class, right? Ever. Maybe it's because I was hearing things like hearing things about the Arab mind, all the time, and et cetera. And I was just like, I'm not even going to try. But and so I think that silence in a classroom or in a broader political environment isn't necessarily an indication of a lack of productivity or a lack of engagement. Silence can be a form of engagement also. But on the other hand, when people feel very passionate about something and feel a desire to say something about it for whatever reason, that they should not curb that desire simply because expression of a particular viewpoint might upset somebody else. Right? It's important to be able, especially on a college campus, it's important to be able to to express a viewpoint without the corresponding fear of recrimination that often comes with it. Now I know I'm dealing in the ideal here, and I know that there is recrimination, right? And I know that you can get in trouble for expressing viewpoints that are unpopular. I heard about that happening with somebody, a few months ago. Situations differ, and I don't want this to be a cop-out. Some people can feel like in a particular moment that they're in a better position to say something that might be controversial and take the heat. Some people might feel like they're not in a great position to do it in that particular moment, and you need to take that into account. You need to take into account the political realities in any given moment. Some people, have very little job security, right? And that therefore they don't need necessarily to be taking the lead on organizing around a particular political issue, unless that's what they desire to do, unless that's what they thought seriously about, right? Adjunct faculty, contingent faculty have no functional academic freedom, all right? Tenured track but untenured faculty members, right, have less academic freedom, but as my case showed, even tenured faculty, right, who are generally the most powerful demographic among the professoriate, right, they can be punished too. And there's a reason that anytime faculty actually get around to organizing something, right, maybe a statement against an administrative action or an investment resolution or whatever, and I've been to a bunch of these meetings, all right, over my career, right, and the first thing that always comes up is, right, well, we don't want to involve our junior colleagues, all right, let's leave our junior colleagues out of it, all right, we're not going to put pressure on them to do anything. But that tells you right there, what kind of repressive shit show most campuses are, right? Because our first thought is, anybody who doesn't have the protection of tenure is going to end up getting in trouble. Meaning, the translation, the assumption is that the administration is thin-skinned and punitive, right? given those realities, I suggest to people, undergraduate, graduate, or otherwise, to take a close reading of the context they find themselves in, their relationship to the particular issue at play, and make an informed decision. But if after thinking about it and thinking about how you want to react to something that you feel is of import to yourself or your community, and you decide that it's important for you to speak about it, speak about it. Speak about it. All right, just do it. There are many ways to conduct a political sense of self, and intimidation isn't one of them. And I don't think that we should be intimidated from engaging something that's important to us. And for me, my assessment of my situation was, this summer, this Gaza thing is terrible. It's horrible. I have many things to say about it that I want to say, but hey, I'm a tenured faculty member. All right, so that algorithm didn't really take into account, I may be fired for it, right? I thought that because it would be illegal to fire me, that it would be impossible, right? And that was my strategic mistake. But you need to take into account that there's always an algorithm of risk and reward that always attaches itself to sort of personal desire and personal passion. In terms of an undergraduate paper, no professor, given any situation that I can think of off the top of my head, would have a right to tell you that your subject matter is inappropriate if that subject matter isn't obscene or hasn't been disallowed from the outset by the professor. Some professors will say, you can write about A, B, and C, right? But you can't write about X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's fine. That's all fair game. But if you have an argument to raise about Hamas that doesn't hew to the mainstream narrative, right? Then do it. Part of the point of writing, your professor should be happy.
Oh, I know what's the point.
Yeah. Oh, you're worried about the.
I was worried about other, emails going through and other kinds of. There are other students who have been approved by professors and people like that.
Right. Well, any student in that situation, though, your professor is supposed to be happy that you're thinking in unconventional ways and that you're trying to undermine conventional wisdom, just as long as you're doing it well, right? But I think that the same applies. If you feel like you might get in trouble somehow for saying something that's gonna upset somebody else, then you always need to consider how important it is for you to speak up at any given moment. And being fired is one thing. Receiving an F is one thing, but getting criminalized for your viewpoints is that's another thing altogether, right? And I always sort of tread carefully when it comes to the matter of criminalization, because I don't think that's something that anybody ever wants to go through. You have to rely on your peers in the SJP. You have to rely on supportive faculty and supportive community members, and there are communities for us to seek out and engage. Political communities who will offer you support, who will have your back, and it's very important to be in communication. What was your question?
My question, just in general, and I think you addressed it, how do you begin to address structural racism on college campuses?
Okay, yeah, just keep having that, but no, it is important to be in conversation with student groups, with faculty, with peers, who are of a like mind. Because I think one lesson that's come out of my firing is that it's going to be very difficult for administrators to pull the same sort of nonsense, just because of the tremendous backlash that they've received, and so you want to be involved in communities that are capable of producing some sort of backlash if a student or a fellow community member or faculty member is treated unjustly.
Hi, my name is College of Staten Island Political Science. I was wondering if you'd be interested in trying to deconstruct the term terrorism. I think that pretty much all of us are involved in terrorism, really, if we think about it. All of us. None of us are innocent. None of us. So, if you thought on that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Ruth Wagner from the sociology department here. I'm sorry I couldn't come at the beginning, and maybe you covered this already, but could you just, I've been worrying about you and your family, like, are you guys okay? And do you feel like you're blacklisted? Are you gonna get a job soon, or how are you guys doing?
I'm Sarah Schulman. I'm the faculty advisor for Students for Justice in Palestine. I want to ask you about the Association of University Professors and how their president did not support you. So it's not just an administrative attack. If you can analyze that. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to start with, and they're all wonderful questions. I'm going to start with, I think, the most challenging of them, with Professor Kasem. Okay, race. I don't have a working definition of it. All right. I don't know that anybody can. I don't know that anybody can create a universal definition of it. I can only analyze it as a discursive phenomenon. That means a phenomenon of discourse, right, or as a political phenomenon, and the way that it's applied in different ways based on what are supposed to be atavistic factors. All right, so when you get somebody shooting up a public place, if the shooter turns out to be, a white male, then he becomes the lone gunman or the nut job, right? If he turns out to be, a person of color, particularly Muslim, right? Then it ends up being an act of terrorism, right? Well, you could easily say, if you remove it from these discursive contexts, that both of them are acts of terrorism, or that neither of them are acts of terrorism. I don't know, whatever. I would argue that they're both acts of terrorism, right? But it's not a matter of what actually constitutes terrorism. It's a matter of how the definitions of terrorism are profoundly inconsistent, and they're profoundly inconsistent in ways, again, that aren't neutral, all right? That tie into particular sets of geopolitics. So, I don't know where I would sort of draw the criteria for what constitutes an act of terrorism or simply an act of violence, all right, or even an act of non-violence, right? I don't know where, and I think probably those criteria are dynamic, but they're certainly not universal, and our uses of the term terrorism are certainly deeply implicated in extant sets of political interests, and it doesn't make much sense to me, for example, that any act of violence by, let's put it in the context of Israel-Palestine, by a Palestinian can automatically and unthinkingly be conceptualized as terrorism. Even children throwing rocks can be conceptualized as terrorism, but displacing 450,000 people, right, as Israel did in Gaza over the course of 51 days this summer, and then carpet bombing the shelters into which they were displaced is not an act of terrorism. To me, it just doesn't make any logical or moral sense. We're fine. We're doing okay. A lot of folks have said to me, what you did was heroic, and it's like, no, really, actually, just tweeting condemnation of Israel during the Gaza onslaught, wasn't actually heroic. Hundreds of thousands of people were doing the same thing, and getting fired wasn't heroic. It was almost an act of chance more than anything else. the only thing I can control is how I respond to the situation. And the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm just not going to let this one go. I'm not. Nobody's ever going to get me to quit talking about Palestine. We're just not. I don't care. I just don't care what folks might wish to throw at me and to throw at my peers and colleagues and my brothers and sisters, I guess, in this particular political struggle. That if they're going to try their best to make criticism of Israel taboo, then I in turn am going to try my best to make sure that we make criticism of Israel common and normal, right? And something that's perfectly acceptable in keeping with what the United States so often likes to call democratic values, right? My kid is having a blast because we had to move in with my parents. My parents are having a blast because their grandkid got to move in with them. So, but I know how lucky I am to have had a place to go, but ending up just sort of homeless at the spur of the moment, we had to break a contract on a condo in Illinois, and the person who was selling us the condo was a lawyer. Can you imagine the law? Do you know what I mean? And then she was a very angry lawyer. Once we told her, oh, by the way, we're not buying your place, put it back on the market even though the closing date is 5 days away. And so all of that has been chaotic and personally difficult, but the kindness of people has been extraordinary. The kindness and the support and the love and the concern, and it's given me a remarkable appreciation for humankind in general. But I like to think that I always had, but it's definitely not in question anymore. So yeah, we're doing okay. I do think that I've been blacklisted. I don't know that I think it's going to be very difficult for me to get a job in American academia again, because the university and its minions have spent so much time just sort of engaged in slander and ridiculous allegations, and so now my name I think is synonymous to some degree with anti-Semitic or the angry ranting guy on Twitter or the uncivil guy, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for those things to become disassociated again. And although I hope it happens sooner or later because I miss my job. The president of AAUP, actually, the AAUP has been very supportive. It's the ex-president, Kerry Nelson. And anybody can be forgiven for thinking that Kerry Nelson is still president of the AAUP, because Kerry Nelson will remind you at every opportunity that Kerry Nelson used to be the president of AAUP, and that the Kerry Nelson is now the ex officio or some shit president of the AAUP, and that he's Kerry Nelson. And by the way, he's Kerry Nelson. He practically made the AAUP. And so, but the current leadership of the AAUP has been very supportive at the national level. Also, the Illinois chapter of the AAUP released a very strong statement. In fact, the national AAUP gave us a grant of $5,000 to help us buy, which is extremely generous of them. The New Jersey AAUP came out with a very strong statement as well. It's just Kerry Nelson, and I really don't much want to talk about him, even though he's spending all of his spare time these days talking about me. He he illustrates a phenomenon that I think that everybody in this room, or anybody who's even mildly interested in Israel-Palestine, has already become accustomed to, and that is the person whose devotion to Israel or whose attachment to Israel is so profound that that person is willing to put aside everything else to defend Israel's reputation. All right, people call it progressive except for Palestine, but I don't like that terminology. I'm trying to get RBI to stick, regressive because of Israel. So next time you want to say PEP, just think of RBI. It's a baseball statistic. It's catchy, but it also sort of is based on the assumption that you don't get to define your sense of political decency based on your most progressive position, right? But your sense of political decency actually should be based on your most progressive position, right? And so there, I think with Nelson and other really sort of staunch advocates of academic freedom who have taken the administration side, it goes to show that an attachment to a particular form of ethno-nationalism can very easily overwhelm any other sense of principle that person might otherwise articulate.
The young gentleman.
Time to just professor in the English department here at College of Staten Island, but formerly at Urbana-Champaign.
Oh wow!
Yeah. I wish you best of luck in your. Well, I'm kind of curious as to what is the disposition of your case at this point. If you can talk on that, are you suing to get the job back? And if so, how does that happen? What's up with that?
I'm Catherine Lavender. I'm the director of the American Studies program, and because we are one of two institutional members of the American Studies Association in the State University of New York, you can imagine there's been a little bit of pressure around the American Studies Association's declaration of a boycott against Israeli institutions which discriminate against and bar Palestinians. So, I just want to point out that sometimes the attack is more subtle than what you're experiencing. So after having run it now for 15 years, there's a pretty strong push to push me out because I refuse to disassociate ourselves from the consent. So there's that. But the question I want to ask, and I have to run to another meeting unfortunately, but the question is, what do you think it will take to transform the way we talk about the state and all of these issues so that we can actually have a conversation in which to criticize the state of Israel is not immediately assumed to be anti-Semitic?
So in that context as well, anything regarding Israel, criticism of Israel, not only in academia, gets the person attacked as an anti-Semite. So can you also talk about the larger picture outside of academia as well, connecting those dots?
Yes, sir. I'll start with the second two questions and then work around the first one. One answer is to keep criticizing it, and let's leave aside any notion of moral responsibility that we or me, that I might be tempted to invoke. Israel is extremely difficult to defend now. No, it really is. It's not because its behavior has necessarily gotten worse, right? As far as the Palestinians and other Arabs are concerned, right? Its behavior has been bad, right? Since 1947, right? Maybe even before, depending on when you want to define, sort of define Israel as some identifiable entity, but. It's difficult to defend because information is flowing more freely. Palestine has sort of become the, it always has been to some degree, but now more than ever, it's kind of the avatar or symbol of third worldism, isn't it, right? Of decolonial struggle, of anti-colonial struggle, and we know, like, even at a basic level, right? Just symbology, right? To side with Israel sort of puts you in the camp of kind of it's like boring white politics. Like, do you? I don't say that disparagingly, I really don't, but it's sort of normative politics, right? Siding with Palestine, it has a sort of edge to it, right? It has a sense of being in conversation with other politics of anti-racism and other politics of decolonization, et cetera, et cetera. That's because one reason is because Israel has worked so hard to develop its image as being of a kind with the United States, right? That they share values, they share a history, that they necessarily share a future. And so when people see in their Facebook feeds or their Twitter feeds or even on the evening news, if anybody still watches the evening news, right? Is there even such a thing as evening news in the 24-hour news telecast era? But they're seeing pictures of entire blocks of housing complexes decimated. They're seeing pictures of dead children, dead infants in Gaza. They're seeing Caterpillar bulldozers just run over houses on the West Bank, right? They're seeing in frequently and in high definition Israeli atrocities. And public opinion is certainly turning against Israel. Its biggest basis of support now seems to be the Fox News right, Christian Zionists, right, and maybe an important but certainly shrinking portion of the American Jewish community. All right, shrinking rapidly, I might add. And if you notice that when I say Israel's getting harder to defend, its supporters don't often defend it anymore. And I'm going to attach this to those two questions in a second, I promise. Around the ASA boycott, around that debate, people against the boycott weren't saying, well, what you're saying about Israel is untrue. They were saying, boycott is an inappropriate response. So there was almost a default acceptance of the fact that Israel is a colonial state. And then in the war on Gaza, the attack on Gaza, right? You heard it a million times. Were pro-Israel advocates denying that 500 children had been killed? Were they denying that civilians had been killed? No. What were they saying was the reason for them being killed? Yeah, it was Hamas. It was the Palestinians' fault. It was, the Palestinians made us do it. Blah blah blah. See, that's not a defense. Okay, that's not. First of all, that's such fourth-rate, piss-poor moral and intellectual thinking, right? That it doesn't even warrant a response. It's embarrassing. All right, it's embarrassing in every possible way. All right, but more than that, it's not a denial that these atrocities are happening. It's merely an unwillingness to take responsibility for them. Alright? That's all it is, right? So you can't defend Israel now. Right? The best way to defend Israel now is to blame the Palestinians for everything that Israel does. That's it. Or to say other countries are horrible too, so let's just lay off Israel, why don't we? Right? No, seriously, that's how people defend Israel now. And so that's important because in regards to the last 2 points, I feel like the embargo on criticism of Israel is crumbling rapidly. See, there's still hell to pay, right? People can get fired, people can have their jobs threatened. People, groups like the David Project can make your life absolutely miserable, or the Alka Initiative if you're a professor, right? The administration can make your life miserable with your students, especially in SJP. They can cancel your charter, they can criminalize you like they've criminalized plenty of SJP students around the country. They can do all of these things, but they can't, that's the way that they prevent Israel, criticism of Israel from happening in the first place. And we have to keep doing it, all right? If their only counter-argument is to silence people, right, by intimidating them or punishing them, then they've already lost the argument. right? They've already lost the argument, and it's just a matter of standing together, banding together, right, and overcoming it, exactly like people are doing with my case. All right, they're saying, look, this guy lost his job for no legitimate reason. We're going to rally behind him, and in rallying behind me, they're not really rallying behind me. They're rallying behind the idea that we're not going to take this nonsense anymore. All right, that this is it, that we've had it, right? That we're either going to have this debate or not, but we're not going to continue to step on people and punish people for expressing criticism of Israel. I think we just have to keep pushing forward, knowing that there's support now, knowing that there's help now, knowing that there are vast communities in the United States and around the world who are willing and able to step up in support and defense of those viewpoints. The case, I did the most like American thing imaginable now. Like all those times that I had trouble being seen as a normative American, I feel like are being put behind me because I sued somebody, and it felt great. You know, I really recommend it. There's a reason that suing people has such a strong hold on the American imagination, right? I didn't sue them for my job. We sued them for Freedom of Information Act documents that my lawyers had requested that the university has refused to give up. You know, I want to be reinstated, and I'm certainly willing to take the university to court to force them to reinstate me if the options of you know before that particular move fail. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah,
There's a couple more questions.
okay, yeah, Jay Arena, Sociology, Anthropology. I have a question in regard to political response to your case in the broader attack on academic freedom. Now, you were hired and then fired by an ostensibly public university, but it's actually been privatized to an enormous degree, as we found through these documents. Wealthy contributors to this public university were dropping dimes to the chancellor and weighing in why you need to be fired. So it seems to underscore the threat that privatization of our public sector and universities have played. In your case, the indirect silence of the adjuncts, you know, over 50% of the teaching courses in higher education. So it seems like part of the response to rehiring you and preventing further cases and stopping the silencing of a large swath of academia is an expansion of the public sector, that we need a reinvestment, a mass public works program. And that would link us up not simply with faculty, but with the broader working class. So, you know, the kind of the class dimensions of this life.
I just wondered for the exhibition of a lot of people here, this interesting fact that kind of students was by a little sometimes that you were hired into the Indian Studies program at UIUC. And I wonder if you could speak to that because I also have a previous connection to UIUC. My partner used to teach there, and we were there at a time when we were trying to mobilize students and faculty against the chief, the mascot of the University of Illinois, and much as you hear around the discourse on the Washington team that Shamrock is doing, it's always, you know, the psychological well-being of the supporters that is at issue. And behind that, at least at UIUC, and again with specialized sports teams, is of course a lot of money and investment, and alumni writing in to say, don't you dare cave in to this kind of pressure because we feel so strongly for the chief, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all white, so it's interesting that they feel so strongly about the chief. And yet when Native Americans stand up to say that they also feel strongly about the chief and the other mascot that shall not be named, that's not considered worthy of engagement. But anyway, all of that is peripheral to my interest in talking about the American perspective.
Maybe I'd end on these two. Looking on finish these. That sounds good. Okay. Well, 'cause, you know, these are big questions, and I'm going to be terse. That's my personal goal for the day. No, that's my personal goal for the next 4 minutes. I don't want to be too ambitious. The class issues are huge. See, public universities, especially land-grant universities, and just for the record, every time I say land-grant, I feel like it's important to say, you know, the land that was granted is indigenous land, so it wasn't necessarily granted, okay, right? But you know, more like stolen and appropriated for different purposes. But that aside,
Terrorism.
yeah, pretty much, yeah, exactly. Or, as we like to call it, nation building.
Another word for it.
Yeah. It's either I can't help but think that whatever vestiges of the idea of the public university, right, as an institution that can mitigate class stratification, right, you know, in contradistinction, right, to the inherited or class inheritance societies of old Europe, right? That the United States is a place where wealth and royalty aren't inherited, right? Everybody gets a chance. We can all pull up our own bootstraps, right? And that idea is mythological as it is, and as ridiculous as it is, and as abusive as it is. Also, I think informed some of the rationales for the development of the public university, that it's a way for poor and or low income communities to have access to college education and thus to upward mobility. They can be particular economic engines in certain locales. You know, economic engines in the sense of working on for the benefit of the entire community. This was never fully the case, right? I'm not talking about the rationale of the identity of the public university, but now as they become privatized, you know, I think their very sense of mission is something different. They're not looking to you know, educate local populations for local economies. They're looking to bring in as many international tuition-paying students as possible, as many out-of-state tuition-paying students as possible. They're looking to generate revenue. All right, and in looking to generate revenue, I don't know if it's an accident or not. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not. But I will simply point out that this moment of privatization, right, has come right at the very moment that African Americans, Native Americans, other marginalized communities have finally developed some access to admission and some access to campus. It's at that very moment, right, that the notion of the university as an economic leveler, right? I think I just used the word that Thomas Friedman has used before. You know, but as an economic engine is being thrown out the window. I don't know if those two things are causal, right? I don't know. I don't know if any studies have been done, but it does seem to me to speak to the fact that the private sector and the 1% are still deeply reliant, right, on the reproduction of white supremacy, of various forms of marginalization, of the social and political institutions that have been a windfall for them and problematic for everybody else. So, yeah, as the universities become more and more privatized, our access to them as citizens becomes more and more difficult. They end up reproducing many of the same class disparities that they were meant to mitigate in the first place. The American Indian Studies thing is huge. I'm glad you give me a chance to talk about it. This is a department on campus that doesn't have a what's the right word? Not amenable. It's a nice relationship with the administration. Okay, it has been punished. The department, members of the department, over and over and over again for protests against Chief Illini. Its members have been pilloried by the local rag, the News Gazette. By the way, I sent out a tweet. It was just like a month ago. It was a picture of a huge cardboard picture with a bloodthirsty Indian on it, right? That was for their homecoming game. And it was about to eat a badger because, they were playing Minnesota. And it was like, got the badger or something. The badger was stupid. It was a big Indian with the huge nose and it was horrible, horrible. So I put the picture on Twitter and all I did was put hashtag civility, right? And I sent it out. The newspaper covered it. They wrote a story about that. They were like, oh, Salaita tweets about like, this is a whole news article. So this is a very shit-stirring local right-wing newspaper. It is, right? And so, they've been covering the involvement of AIS in the chief controversy for years. And that's led to tons of attacks on the faculty of the department and its supporters, right? So you have this sort of angst, but see, what people who are attached to things like the chief, all right, and I don't even like to think of them as mascots, all right? They are mascots in a sense, but in the end, they're brands. They're corporate logos. And it's like, come on, man, get a sense of identity that moves beyond a corporate logo. You can do better than that. Go on a spiritual pilgrimage. Go find yourself. Do you know what I mean? Do something, right? But you're really attached to the Redskins logo. That's merchandising, dude. That's not identity. That's you buying a product. Right? That's you buying into a brand, into a certain imagery that's been monetized. That's nothing that you should invest your sense of identity in, right? You're just a sucker of capitalism, right? That's exactly what you're doing. But it's not about the chief. And people in Illinois love the chief. I mean, it's to the point of utter irrationality, right? Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. It's true. They love the chief, and they are extremely hypersensitive to any criticism of the chief. Go look up the Champaign-Urbana News Gazette and type in chief and enjoy your afternoon. But you might want to have some booze on hand, or some heavy drugs, something, because it's difficult to read. It's not. And everybody complains about the natives who are trying to take care. See, they don't understand. It's not about the natives. It's about them. It's about the white people who've invested their sense of identity in their continued power, right? To name native identity, to control native imagery, right? To remain in charge, more or less. That's what it is. That's the imagery and the mythology that they're clinging to. And so again, the notion of civility, even on the terms by which the university defines it, right, which we should never accept as a definition, right? The university can't move past hypocrisy, right? Because you have racist imagery all over campus. You have on Phyllis Wise's watch, all right, black enrollment drop around 50%. They had in their freshman class of fall 2014. All right. This is a university of 43,000 students, all right, and entering class with 332 black students. Yeah. Down from a high of, at the beginning of Wise's tenure, down from a high of like 540, okay? And so they're going to talk about civility this, civility that, safe spaces, comfortable students, blah, blah, blah. can choose to take those their definitions of those words at face value, or you could choose to look at the structural realities of the campus, where racism is deeply ingrained in the very identity, with the chief literally, of the institution. All right, and then the administration's invocation of civility suddenly becomes a lot less compelling. Thank you, everybody.